Welcome to Getting to Know You. This idea was created by Betty Osan, who felt our community was full of a lot of people with interesting stories. And I happen to believe everybody has an interesting story. And so we have now been going around either getting volunteers or a little lobbying is done, whatever. But I'm super happy that Katherine Lindstrom has agreed to be taped today on Getting to Know You. I also want to give acknowledgments to Pamela Penn, who's going to be typing these out, and we'll be getting copies of the programs. So with that, I'd like to introduce Kathleen Lindstrom, or Katherine.
Katherine, yes, thank you.
In fact, I was going to ask you, how did you get teachers to continue to name Katherine rather than trying to shorten it?
Oh, in elementary school, they tried to shorten it to Kathy because that was fewer letters to fit on the piece of paper that you were writing. But my grandmother always insisted on Katherine. And then, of course, when I was in trouble, it was Katherine Elizabeth. And I'm sure that a lot of people are the same way. I can still hear my grandmother calling me that.
Yes, we used to have a challenge with schools because our son was Jonathan and they'd want to make it John, and our daughter was Elizabeth and they'd want to make that shorter. But to this day, they are now Jonathan and Elizabeth. So I like the long, older names. But you and I have something in common. We're second generations here. Your father was in Wyrick, my father was in Wyrick, and my mother lived another 10 years after he died. So I would agree, many of the staff down there are still there. And there's one woman that just warms my heart when I see her, because she was with me when my dad died and she was with me when my mom died. And that makes Westminster very special.
Yes, it does. Actually, both of my parents were here. They lived in independent living for a few years, and they both went to Wyrick at the same time and shared a room there. My mother had Alzheimer's, and as long as my dad was nearby, he could keep track of her. When he passed away, then she went into the special care unit. And she was there for 6 years after he passed away. So the special care unit felt like part of my family and my life. I owned a house just, and we would go out to lunch. And that was a special time for the two of us. And it wasn't too long after she moved into special care that we couldn't do that anymore. I had a little Saturn car, and she couldn't figure out how to put her foot in and sit down at the same time. And so she couldn't get in the car anymore. We used to go over to In-N-Out to eat. And she, pick up a French fry and eat, and she'd have a soda, but she didn't know what to do with a hamburger. And so I'd have to cut the hamburger into pieces and use a fork and feed her. And I can't tell you how many people came into that restaurant and either gave me a little wave or came over to the table and said, is that your mother? You take such good, loving care of her. And that just always made my day. I wasn't doing it for anybody else other than her. But she didn't know that. And other people did. And, we spent holidays here. We'd have Christmas dinner. I got to know the other families.
Mhm.
You don't really get to know the other residents. You get to know how they act and what they do and the patterns they follow.
Mhm.
But I got to know the families.
Yes.
And it warmed your heart to see how much they cared for people.
Mhm.
And it was really good for them to see how the staff took care of the residents.
Mhm.
It was like the staff and the resident had been best friends forever.
Right.
And from that time, I always knew that I was going to move here.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was 20 years ago.
Mhm. Mhm.
But then I had to make out my game plan.
Mhm.
How am I going to get to Westminster? Huh? Well, I got to get my house paid off. Then I can, start saving. And I always knew that I was going to need support in my life earlier than most people. Because when I was 18 months old, I got polio.
Uh-huh.
And that was in November of 1953, and of course they came out with the vaccine in January of 54. But really, polio has been the main factor in my whole life. It was difficult as a child. When you say polio nowadays, you and I know what it means,
Mhm.
but Krista probably doesn't know what it means unless she knew that her grandmother or grandpa or older aunts or uncles
Mhm.
might have known somebody who had it.
Mhm.
But polio affects your central nervous system, part of your brain, and what it affects, it doesn't send out messages to your muscles. So if your muscles never get a message to move, they never move and they die.
Mhm.
And as a child, you kept growing and your bones were always growing, but your muscles didn't do anything. And so it was always a challenge. I had to wear a brace until I was 16. And when I was 16 years old, they finally decided that my body had physically matured to where it was going to be. They stopped the growth by putting staples in the growth plates on my knee. So I really only have a 1-inch difference between my two legs. So everything is adapted, starting with getting the shoes right so that you're walking at an even keel. And then the last step that they did to get me out of the brace was they fused my ankle. So my ankle doesn't move in any direction, any way. So between the ankle not moving and no muscles, that really hampers what I could do. So now I'm getting back to, I knew I had to, that I was going to need help earlier in my life than most people. So I made that plan to move into Westminster when I was 65. I had a house, and I had a yard. It was keeping up the yard, it was keeping up the house, it was keeping up working all of the time. And it took everything I had to just maintain that. And I enjoyed my work immensely, and that's what I put a lot of effort into. But I always enjoy a challenge.
What were the advantages of having polio?
Ooh, that's good. I got a lot of attention from my parents and grandparents and brothers and sisters. Even at school, when all of the kids would go outside for recess, I couldn't do that. So I was sitting in the classroom with the teacher, and I always got extra attention in the classroom. People felt sorry for me, even though I never felt sorry myself. It was wonderful. I learned how to be independent. I learned how to entertain myself. I learned to think about others as they had thought about me. I was the oldest of 5 kids, and both my parents worked. Our grandmother took care of us during the day, after school, or in summer all the time. She lived in the same city, and she would come over to our house every day, bring along cousins, and Grandma would take care of all of us. Again, the kids would be outside playing, and I was in the house cooking with Grandma, or doing needlework or something like that. But both my parents always had a strong family connection. And on the weekends, at our house, we would, get all of the chores done. And then after lunch, we would go over to Aunt Mary's house, and Dad would get busy in the garden, and Mother would get busy in the kitchen. And pretty soon we had her works done for the week. And like when Halloween came, yeah, we might have trick-or-treated in the neighborhood, but our parents were more interested in throwing the kids in the car and driving to people's homes who couldn't get out or who didn't have kids coming to the door. And we had a lot of photo opportunities. So early on, that's how we lived, and we learned to love that. We couldn't wait to see our relatives or our friends. Yeah, after school we were out playing with our friends, but family and close friends were so much a part of our family. Now I get to Westminster and I feel the same way. This is my family. I never married. I never had kids. My sisters each have 4 kids, so there were always kids around. But it took everything that I had to take care of the house and to work and to maintain my physical abilities. And it was, I concentrated on that. And now it's just wonderful. Yes, I'm retired and don't have work anymore unless they're dredging up something from 20 years ago that they want to know about. I did tax returns, so there's always something in the past that somebody wants to know.
Actually, you work quite a bit here too, as president of the Residents Council, and your wonderful rabbit that entertains all of us. I think you keep pretty busy around here.
Oh, I keep real busy. If it's below 100 degrees at 7 o'clock at night, I'll go and ride around the campus on my scooter a couple of times. I just want to know how full the parking lot is, who's washed their car and who hasn't, if there's any new dents. I want to know if the sprinklers are all working or if there's a puddle going down the driveway. I think part of that comes from being a diligent worker, but I just notice everything around me all of the time, because most of the time I'm kind of stay put. Yes, you see me walking around the campus, but usually if I have to go any farther than dining services or mail or the administrative offices, I hop on a scooter because it's much faster. When I stand and talk to somebody, you'll see me lean against the wall because I need that support. Or I'll lean against a table because I need to balance, because I can only stand on one leg. The other leg is there, but it can't do very much. So when I'm talking to you and we merge over to the wall, you know what's happening.
My husband got polio in 1939, and he was a very active little boy, but he was 6 years old, and at that time they said, you just are quiet, and so he was put in a room and a radio, and that's how he lived. So with quarantine, it had new meaning for me when we've been in quarantine here, because I had heard, as you said, he had polio, he was da-da-da, had a brace, but it didn't have the same meaning to me as it has now when quarantine. We still have the sign that was on his home front door that he was quarantined, but yes, it gave new meaning to a lot of things around that. So, but you would also say it added to your sensitivity of things around you.
Oh yes, by far.
Where did you get your sense of humor?
Ooh, I got my sense of humor from my dad.
Uh-huh.
He made everything that we did fun.
Uh-huh.
And I guess I don't think any of my other brothers and sisters have the same sense of humor that I do, but they know how I am, and they appreciate it. You talked about quarantine. Initially, when I got polio, I was in the hospital for 7 months. And that's quarantine. I was fortunate to live an hour away from the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. And they, of course, were on the leading edge of what to do. And not only was it quarantine, but the only time I'd see my mom and dad and my grandma was on Sunday afternoon. They'd come for a drive. And I was more bonded to the nurses in their white starched uniforms than I was to my parents. And by the time I got home, there were 2 more little kids in the house to share mom and dad with. And eventually there were 5 of us. There's 8 years between myself, the oldest, and my youngest sister. I'm real close to my 2 sisters. You've seen that already because my sister lives here. She and her husband lived here well before I came. Again, it was her experience that brought them to Westminster too. Although I would say that on my bucket list, I never plan on going to Wyrick. That's a goal, to never have to go there, to be able to maintain myself and my independence long enough that I don't need that help. But if I need help, and realistically I probably will, Wyrick was my choice of where to go. I hadn't ever experienced anywhere else that attracted me like Wyrick did. When my folks were in Wyrick, the end of their time here, they were just starting the construction on the assisted living. So assisted living was never in my thought process. It was independent living or Wyrick. We should get on to something different.
Well, I was wondering whether your value system isn't part of a strong Minnesota stoicism. I'm going to do it myself, because when I lived in Minnesota, if there was a snowstorm, everybody got to the meetings. I didn't understand it. When we lived in California, if it rained, you might have absences for a meeting. So I think you have good Minnesota blood in you.
Yes, I have good Minnesota blood in me, but really the foundation of my life is that I'm a born-again believer. I know that when I die, I'm going to heaven, and I know that there are going to be family members there because they believe the same way I did. And really, that's the core of who I am. Considering others as more important than myself. Fortunately, I have humor.
Yes, you do.
I have creative outlets.
Mm-hmm.
And I love people.
Uh-huh.
And only because of my belief in Jesus Christ am I here and have those things.
Mm-hmm. I believe you worked in a family business as a child, because I think there was a restaurant. Is that correct?
That's correct. My mother and dad purchased a small restaurant that had half a dozen booths and half a dozen counter stools. And my folks worked 7 days a week. And as us children got to be old enough, we were in there helping, whether it was washing dishes, cooking, running the cash register, doing the janitorial. My folks gave me a strong work ethic, and the same for all my brothers and sisters. And we tackle every job that's given to us, and we do it to the best of our ability. And if we can't do the job right, we aren't going to accept the challenge. But I knew that I was not going to be in the restaurant business. It was too physically demanding. So I got an accounting degree. I was always good at numbers, and I worked for the same company for 40 years. And it was such an interesting company to work for. We bought and sold properties or businesses. And we would purchase an apartment building that was run down, and we would take it over, fix it up, stabilize the tenant base, and we would sell it and use that money to buy the next thing. And when the company found a sound business that was good, good cash flow, easy to manage, down the line potential, held on to that business and just kept it. And so I was the accounting and tax department. Sometimes that was all just me, and sometimes I might have half a dozen bookkeepers working for me. It just depended on the assets that we had at the time. And I was always a part of figuring out what's wrong, what are our options in fixing it, how much is it going to cost, all the way down to how much income there is to hit the tax return, and program that in for now and later, and strategizing that part. So I did corporate tax returns, sub-S, partnerships, homeowners associations, nonprofit. I've had tax experience, and probably my biggest strength or asset to the company I worked for was the fact that I understood the overall picture, how everything fit together, and how to use that to the best advantage. It was a little bit hard to walk away from work, but not long after I retired at age 65, so I qualified for Medicare. Trump got elected, and one of the first things he did was change the tax laws. He reduced the corporate taxes, and he really changed the way the pass-through companies were treated. And I thought, I'm not going to learn that stuff. So I decided I'd find something else to do.
Did you ever think about how being the oldest of 5 children helped you be a good team builder for your career? You were the oldest of 5, and you're a team builder here, and you were a team builder in your career. Do you think you got your first experience in your family?
Oh, I did. Yes, being the oldest, you're always babysitting the little ones, even down to changing the diapers on the babies. But I had to keep track of where they were and what they were doing, and play a game if they wanted to play a game. I had to figure out what we were going to have for lunch, and invariably they'd all want something different. And how to build consensus. We'll do this today and we'll do that tomorrow. But it still all comes down to the love that you have, whether it's for your siblings or for your family here at Westminster. If you love enough, that comes through and it works.
And love is not a limited commodity. Love creates more love. It's abundant, isn't it? And I also know you love to travel. Can you share with us some of your many, many awesome travels?
Yes. I travel by cruise ship because I don't have to tote a suitcase or carry it up the stairs or pick it up from the floor and get it onto the bed. I can get onto a cruise ship, put everything in the closet, and I'm set. And you're a little bit limited about what you can do. I mean, it's hard to go on a safari from a cruise ship. But I have been so many places and done so many things. Yes, I love to travel. When I was working, I would limit myself to only taking 1 week off at a time, because the pile of work was too big if I took 2 weeks off. But once I retired, then it's just free reign. I travel with both of my sisters. Sometimes it's the three of us together, and sometimes just me and one of them. I haven't ventured alone travel, and I don't think that would happen. But it's always been on my sister Becky's and my bucket list to travel around the world. And we just picked the absolute worst time in the entire history of our lives to start a world cruise. And we got about a quarter of the way into the cruise. We left from LA and we're in French Polynesia. And all of a sudden, the port we were supposed to go to today, the ship, I couldn't see any land from our window, and I was wondering what's going on. Well, pretty soon, we find out that the port is closed. It was closed for the protection of the inhabitants of that island. And as we continued on the cruise, the ports began to close more and more, and pretty soon there were no ports left that would take cruise ships, and we had to abandon our world cruise about halfway through. And that was in Perth, Australia. And by the time we hopped a plane and got back, we landed in LA, and LA had just shut down. There was nobody on the streets. The airport was packed because everybody was coming home. And it was strange because you have to go through your passport verification, and then you go through customs. Everybody at every station we went through was just waving you in. We don't want you standing here in a busy airport with all these people. Get out on the street as fast as you can. We hopped a cab. Even after 24, 36 hours flying with stops from Perth, Australia, getting to LA, trying to sleep on an airplane. We got a rental car and we drove as fast as we could without going over the speed limit all the way home. And we got home and came in the gates of Westminster, and we got escorted to our apartment and said, you can't leave for 14 days. But before we set off, we said, we're off for an adventure. And that's how it was at every turn or every stop. We don't care what's coming at us, we're having a good time. And that's still on the bucket list. We signed up for a 2023 world cruise. Becky has some grandchildren that are graduating from high school and involved in sports and those kinds of things. So she is a little tied up for the next 2 years, but we hope to go in 2023. And so we need to maintain our health and well-being and our interests. And I had also made a commitment to the Residence Council at Westminster, so I knew that I was going to be committed to that. And we still travel. That's always such an enjoyment. I love meeting people. I love going down to the dining room and the host saying, would you like to sit by yourself or would you like to join someone and we joined because we want to meet new people, find out where are you from, why are you here? And it just, it doesn't end.
I'm wondering, explain to me, because in my awareness, being Swedish means being very stoic. And yet you said you got your sense of humor from your dad. Now tell me about humor and Swedish. How does that go together?
I just know I can't tell any of his jokes. We grew up in a small town on the Mississippi River.
And what was the name of that town?
Winona. And yes, I had to be stoic. When I had polio, they were doing these awful things to me all the time. Moving muscles that I didn't want to move. Pressing myself to try this, try that. And if the pressure wasn't from an outside source, the pressure came from within. If I just do this, I'll have met my goal for the day. But yeah, you have to do it without crying or showing emotion. You had to be brave. That mindset centered around everything then. And when you're living alone, like I did, from the time I was out of high school until, well, still now, you have to be stoic. You have to manage the house. You have to figure this out on your own. You can't ask for help. Nobody wants to help you. Change the air conditioner filter. But I always figured out how to do everything. I was resourceful in that way.
When did you restart your relationship with kitties? Because I know you've got 2 kitties now, and you took a trip up north, and they had a good time, and so did you. But how long have kitties been in your life?
Kitties have always been in my life. When I was a child at home and the other kids were out playing, I was inside and I had the cat. My whole life growing up, the cat always slept on my bed. That was the choice it made. And living alone, you have to have somebody to talk to. You have to have somebody to holler at. I've always had 1 or more cats. I used to breed Bengal cats. I had a couple of females, and I had a friend that had a male. And so once a year they'd go over and visit, and I would have 1 or more litters of kittens at the same time. And the Bengal is a special breed of cat that most people sell, supposedly to make a profit. I was just happy to have kittens that somebody else wanted, and they were easy to get rid of when you were trying to empty the house out. And I had a beautiful rag doll cat when I was living here, and when Becky and I decided to go on the world cruise, I looked a little while for somebody to maybe take care of her. I couldn't find anybody willing to take care of a cat for that long and then give it back, but I was able to find a new home for her. So I knew the minute I got back, I was going to have a cat. So Becky went online and found a place called Cool Cats Rescue, and they post photos the minute those kittens are born, so you can fall in love with them then. And as soon as they were ready to leave home, I got pictures of the 4 that were in the litter available, and I fell in love with Tootsie and Dolly, and they were named before I got them. I would have gone with something like Ebony and Ivory, because one is all black and one is mostly white. But they're my best friends.
Thank you so, so much. This has just been a delight, and the time's gone by so fast. I really want to thank you for letting us getting to know you, and just thank you.
Thank you. I was a little hesitant at this because I think that some of you see me all too much. I'm involved in my neighborhood. I'm involved in the residents' council. Tom and I get together during the coronavirus to do Let's Talk. But I thought, no, I want people to know where I'm coming from. I want them to know that I'm a believer. I want them to feel free to come up and ask me anything, or have dinner, or take them out to the doctor. At this time, I am not washing any cars. But I appreciate the time here and the ability to do this. I thank God for everything, every day. And I thank Him that He's placed me here in Westminster.
Well, we appreciate you very, very much. Thank you.